At my company's anniversary party, I unexpectedly ran into my classmate, Sarah. But Sarah just mocked me for being a factory worker. "Don't come near us if you see us, okay? My husband is a Harvard-educated director, way above someone lowly and incompetent like you," her words seemingly enjoying the harassment. It brought back painful memories of middle school. Back then, Sarah used to bully me for being poor. Finally, I felt as if the last straw of my patience had snapped inside me. "Well, your husband will be unemployed from tomorrow," I said. Sarah was shocked by my unexpected words, but soon laughed it off as a joke. However, she and her husband would soon understand the true meaning of my words. "My name is David Young. I'm turning 42 this year. I met my wife Annie at work, and we got married. It's our 15th wedding anniversary this year, and I've never really had a serious argument with a kind and family-oriented Annie. I'm always grateful to Annie, who always supports me, and we live a peaceful life together." One day, my company decided to hold an anniversary party. It's the 50th anniversary this year, so it was going to be a big event, and I was looking forward to it. On the day of the anniversary, I wore a suit and tie picked out by Annie and got ready to leave. Annie had her hair done beautifully in the morning and was wearing a light-coloured dress. "How do I look, David?" "You look incredibly beautiful," I replied. Her elegant beauty was mesmerising. Perhaps partly due to my bias, with Annie by my side, I headed to the venue. The venue we rented was quite large, and as we got closer, we saw more people heading to the same place. "It's typical for a big corporation's anniversary party to have so many invitees," I remarked. While exchanging words with Annie, we entered the venue and waited for the event to start. Inside, many people had already gathered, exchanging greetings and introducing themselves. Company events are, in a way, a chance for self-promotion, so the more capable employees are eager to network. While I was greeting attendees, I was suddenly approached. "Is that you, David?" It was Sarah, right there in front of me. Sarah, the beauty and centre of attention in our class since childhood, still maintained her beauty even after about 30 years since middle school. But now her beauty faded as she glared at me with her eyes narrowed. "It's been a while, hasn't it, David? What are you doing now? Everyone's worried about you since you never show up to reunions." Sarah spoke to me with a mocking tone. To be frank, back in middle school, I wasn't exactly a standout in my class. Sarah, seemingly oblivious to this, kept talking with a hype, cheerful laugh. "Even though I hadn't asked, I got married 5 years ago. My husband is an elite employee who was in charge of an overseas branch until recently, and today he's even getting recognised as an outstanding employee." "That's great, congratulations," I said, surprised that Sarah's husband worked at this company. I still offered my congratulations. Then Sarah, for some reason displeased, frowned. "There's no need for you to congratulate me. What kind of job do you have being here? Are you associated with the company?" Before I could explain, Sarah waved her hand dismissively, as if bored with the conversation. "Never mind, it's not important. You probably work in some subcontractor's factory, being a middle school graduate and all." "I do go to the factory." I started to speak again, but by that time, Sarah had already turned her back on me. "A factory worker like you should even be here." "Just stay quiet in the corner and don't embarrass yourself." Sarah walked away towards a man that must be her husband, Brandon. While I thought it was petty, I made sure to remember his name. Sarah mocked me for being a middle school graduate, but to be precise, that's not entirely true. When I was in middle school, my mom got seriously ill, and my dad lost his job due to the recession. From that day, my life changed completely. My dad, once a diligent employee, started drinking and gambling to escape from the harsh reality. Soon, we ran out of money and had to sell our house, moving into a small, old one-bedroom apartment. As a middle schooler, I grew taller, but couldn't afford new uniforms or sportswear, so I had to make do with hand-me-downs from relatives. This made me a target for ridicule. My classmates called me poor and uncool. Sarah, beautiful and bossy, was the ringleader, even instructing the entire class not to talk to me. She was the popular girl in class, and no one dared to go against her, so her bullying continued until we graduated. On graduation day, Sarah called me over and asked with a sneer, "Which high school are you going to?" "It would be good if you could get a hand-me-down uniform." I was so annoyed by her persistent teasing that I retorted, "I won't need a uniform for the high school I'm going to. Not going to high school, just working after middle school." "Yeah, that's right. I'm going to work after graduating middle school." Hearing my response, Sarah burst into laughter. "Can't believe you don't even have the money to go to high school. Well, do your best to earn you put, a middle school graduate." I left without replying to her. What I told Sarah wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't completely false either. I attended a night high school while working during the day. My dad was still drowning in alcohol, and my mom, who was doing piecework, kept going in and out of the hospital. So I had no one to rely on. After graduating middle school, I desperately looked for a job, but there were hardly any companies willing to hire a middle school graduate. The only place that hired me was the machine manufacturing factory where I work now. I've always loved tinkering with machines, so I threw myself into this job. I worked during the day and attended high school at night. Balancing work and study was tough, but I managed, thanks to the encouragement from my older colleagues. They taught me the ropes at work and even treated me to lunch sometimes, treating me like their own son. Years went by as I worked, supported by everyone. After finally graduating high school, I planned to continue working at the factory as an employee, but my senior colleagues advised me otherwise. "Now that you've graduated high school, try to study as much as you can," they suggested. I went to college. I chose a university department related to my company's business and gained strength by acquiring various certifications and researching specialized fields. After graduating from college, I returned to the company. A few years later, at 25, I encountered a turning point at work. I met Annie, who'd become my wife. Annie was kind to everyone and had a lovely smile, and I gradually developed a fondness for her. But it turned out that she was also interested in me. She asked me out on a date, and that's how our relationship began. A few years later, we happily got married and built a warm family together. Throughout such a life full of ups and downs, I had completely forgotten about being harassed in middle school. So, when Sarah approached me at the venue today, I was genuinely surprised. Seeing my distressed look, Annie looked at me worriedly. After I briefly explained the situation, she tightly grasped my hand. "No matter what anyone says, I know you're a wonderful person, David. Let's stay confident and enjoy the company's anniversary party." "Yeah, you're right." Encouraged by her supportive words, I squeezed her hand back. Thus, we decided to wait for the party to start. After exchanging greetings with everyone, the hustle and bustle finally settled down. Thinking of resting until the start time, I moved towards the wall with Annie. "Oh, you're still here." There were Sarah and her husband, whom I had just parted ways with. I was a bit surprised to bump into them so unexpectedly, but I sincerely congratulated her husband, Brandon. "Brandon, I heard you're an outstanding employee getting an award today. Congratulations." But instead of responding, Brandon just looked me over as if appraising me. "Is this the factory worker classmate you were talking about, Jay? He has the audacity to attend the company's anniversary party despite being a mere worker." Sarah returned the words with a bitter expression. Then Brandon, ignoring my presence, curiously asked Sarah, "But for a factory worker, he's wearing a nice suit." I'm an elite, so I'm quite particular about suits. Even if he tries hard to wear a good suit, it's ruined because he's a lowly worker. It's truly embarrassing to have someone like him as a classmate. Frowning, Sarah spat out her words, and Brandon inquired further, "Embarrassing, Jay. Imagine he's been a factory worker since dropping out of middle school. That's 30 years of being a mere worker." "Well, wow, really. That's unbelievable." Sarah pointed and laughed at me, and Brandon leaned back, distancing himself as if amused. They both looked down on me with obvious disdain and then glanced at the person next to me. There stood Annie, watching the two of them intently. "So, this bottom-of-the-barrel worker, even though he's a dropout, managed to get married. What does your wife do?" Sarah asked me, and I answered honestly, "She works in the same field as me. We met at work." At that moment, Sarah and Brandon looked at each other and burst out laughing. A couple both sweating it out in the field, doing menial work. Perfect match for an incompetent dropout like you. They started mocking not just me, but also my wife. I couldn't understand how they could say such awful things to my wife, a stranger to them. As I stood there stunned, Sarah blurted out, "But if I were you, I'd be too miserable to even mention working in a factory." "Yeah, for an elite like me, it's unimaginable to live such a lowly life. Please stop talking like that," I retorted angrily to their cruel insults. But Sarah looked at me as if I were something dirty and turned her back, and Brandon shooed me away as if swatting a fly. "If we keep talking to you, people might think I'm a local class worker like you. Could you go somewhere else, Jay? Talking to someone lowly like you might rub off on me." I was boiling with anger at such rude behaviour, but as a grown-up, I couldn't just let my emotions take over and start yelling. So I tried hard to hold it in. However, Sarah seemed to mock my feelings and hurled more disdainful words. "From now on, if you see us, don't come close, okay? My husband is a Harvard-educated director. Way different from a lowly, incompetent person like you." Her words enjoying the harassment brought back painful middle school memories. Back then and even now, Sarah acted arrogantly, thinking she wouldn't be retaliated against. I felt like I heard the sound of my patience snapping inside. "Well, your husband will be unemployed from tomorrow." Sarah was taken aback by my unexpected words, staring with wide eyes. As I stared back expressionlessly, she laughed it off, pretending, "Ah, my husband unemployed. What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Why would a mere factory worker like you have any power over my husband? That's because I'm the president of the company." For a moment, Sarah was dumbfounded, then suddenly burst into loud laughter. "You, the president? Don't be silly. Are you just saying that because my husband is a Harvard-educated director, and you want to one-up him? It's not a lie." Yeah, keep your fantasies to yourself, just like in middle school, I continued seriously, but Sarah clearly didn't believe a word. Then Brandon looked back and forth between me and Annie, standing by my side, and shrugged in disbelief. Married to a husband who spouts such fantasies, she must be quite the wife. Aren't you embarrassed to stand beside such a man? After spitting out those words, Brandon and Sarah hardly left together. As I watched their backs, I trembled with anger. The person who had harassed me so much in middle school was still treating me this way even now as an adult. And it wasn't just me they were mocking, it was Annie, my wife. I couldn't stay silent any longer. As I was about to step forward in anger to call them back, a gentle hand was placed on my shoulder. It was Annie. I heard everything, but it's not good to reprimand them here. But I couldn't just back down, especially after they laughed at Annie. But as I looked at her, I was taken aback by her unexpected expression. She wore a mischievous smile. I have a good idea hearing Anne's plan. I nodded deeply, feeling a sense of relief. When the announcement for the party start was made, we moved to our assigned seats. The event began on time, and the employees started singing the company anthem. In my peripheral vision, I saw Sarah and Brandon singing along as well. After checking with the organisers, it turned out that Brandon was indeed being recognised as an outstanding employee. Along with several other distinguished employees, he was escorted to a special seat with his family. Imagining what was about to happen, I suppressed a rising chuckle. After the anthem, the entertainment part started. There were performances by a magician and comedians, summarizing the company's history in a skit, filling the room with a festive atmosphere. As the entertainment ended, the host led the applause and continued with the ceremony. Next, we'll have a speech from the President and CEO, Mr. Young, the host announced. Upon those words, I began to walk slowly. As I stood on the stage, I looked over the gathered crowd, expressing my gratitude while everyone listened intently. Only 2 people were the exception. Sarah and Brandon were staring at me, mouths agape in shock. Even from the stage, I could see their mouths moving. Why? Why is he speaking? It can't be true. He's the president. I haven't heard anything about this. Imagine that's what they were muttering. I continued speaking. Normally, we would now proceed to the ceremony for awarding outstanding employees. However, before that, I have an announcement to make. One of the awardees, the director who was assigned to our overseas branch, Brandon, will be dismissed from his position effective today. The room was enveloped in silence in an instant. As I tried to continue with a smile, the host approached me. What is your reasoning for this? The host asked me, appearing confused. It was then that Sarah suddenly stood up and shouted, "That's a lie, everyone. This man was just a classmate from my middle school. He's just a mere factory worker. Why is he standing there? Yeah, this must be some kind of prank. And this taste in entertainment is terrible, right, everyone?" With her shrill voice, Sarah spat out these words, and next to her, Brandon grinned smugly, looking back and forth between me and Sarah, bursting into a brazen laugh. The guests in the room started murmuring, enveloped in a tense atmosphere. I continued speaking calmly. Sarah just mentioned earlier that working in a factory is a lowly job. She also told me not to talk to her anymore, fearing that the lowness would rub off on her. So what? Sarah glared back at me, hands on her hips, still refusing to admit wrongdoing. I work for this company. I cannot continue working with someone who is ashamed of our work, I stated. But my husband is an elite director, completely different from you, Sarah retorted. But at that moment, the executive director, Ethan, rushed to the awardee's seat, his face flushed with anger, and started yelling at Brandon. "Hey, apologize to Mr. Young right now." However, Sarah and Brandon, still half smiling, refused to believe Ethan's words. "What's wrong, Ethan? Why should we apologize to some factory worker? He's just a lowly, incompetent worker. He's just trying to scare us by lying about firing my husband," Sarah said. But Ethan shouted back, his voice trembling, "State the name of our company." "Young High-Tech Corporation," Brandon muttered. Oh, muttering this, Brandon suddenly realized, and his face turned pale. His name, David Young. Could it be? He's really our company's president. At Brandon's words, Sarah froze in shock. During this time, I had been watching them, and judging that they finally understood, I spoke again. "It seems you finally believe me, Brandon." His face ashen, Brandon was shaking all over, hardly able to stand from his chair. "In fact," I continued, "Annie is the daughter of a major manufacturer that produces some of the leading semiconductor devices in the country. The company that accepted me, a middle school grad, was one of her parents' factories." At that time, it was still a mid-sized company taking on various machinery productions, but 30 years ago, it developed its first proprietary product, a microcryptometer, and has since expanded its business with the advancement of electronic device technology. Now, alongside semiconductor manufacturing, we're collaborating with foreign companies to develop even more precise testing systems. Combining the knowledge I gained in college with a practical perspective, I actively participated in product development after graduating, resulting in several hit products. Thanks to this, I was transferred to the headquarters, promoted to Director of Electronic Hardware Development, and that's where I met Annie. Even after our marriage, Annie's family never spoke of my past, attending a night high school instead. They warmly accepted me as a diligent and enthusiastic young man, rare in this era. Wanting to repay this family and the company that raised me, I devoted myself to my work without distraction. Then, 2 years ago, when Annie's father retired, I took over as the president. Understanding the truth, Brandon looked like he was about to collapse, and Ethan addressed him even more desperately. You were overseas, so you might not have known directly, but at least check the information about the company you work for. That is, Brandon, his face still pale, tried to stammer an excuse, but Ethan, his face red with anger, kept yelling, "You're so caught up in being an elite from Harvard University that you don't even know the face of our president. I'm ashamed that I recommended someone like you as an outstanding employee." Ethan then grabbed Brandon by the scruff of his neck and dragged him in front of me. I deeply apologized for the disrespectful behavior of my subordinate. "Please forgive us. I'm so sorry for my ignorance," Ethan said, bowing his head forcefully. Brandon finally knelt down of his own accord, his face turning bright red as sweat dripped onto the floor. Annie, who had been watching this unfold, turned to me with a question. "David, what will you do now? You've revealed the truth in front of everyone." To avoid being accused of unilaterally firing an employee, yeah, well, he's fired. Someone who insults a person they've just met like that definitely doesn't fit in with our company, I said. Upon hearing my words, Ethan seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the situation was resolved. But the next voice came from Sarah, who had been dumbfoundedly watching everything. Her face flushed with anger, she lashed out at me. "I don't care if you're the president or whatever. Why do you get to act so high and mighty?" Furious and almost panting, Sarah was met with my calm response. "Before you criticized others, maybe you should worry about your own life. With your husband fired, you'll lose your income and won't be able to live luxuriously anymore," I said. Sarah, upon hearing my words, finally seemed to grasp her situation. Standing frozen, her lips quivering, Annie glanced at her and whispered, "To me, David, let's have those people leave now." "You're right. It's a special anniversary party after all. We need to make sure everyone who came enjoys it," I said. I instructed the staff to escort Brandon, who was still kneeling, and Sarah, pale-faced and rigid, out of the venue. After they left, we refreshed the atmosphere of the venue and successfully concluded the party. Brandon repeatedly tried to apologize, but I dismissed them. Having an employee who looks down on others just because of Sarah's words could eventually lead to issues at work. Brandon, who had been fired, suffered greatly since he had already purchased a luxurious home and car on loan, relying on his salary. Sarah, who always loved a lavish lifestyle and apparently never saved much, found their finances in dire straits within months. Unable to pay the enormous loans, the couple eventually had to sell their house and car and move to a shabby apartment. Brandon struggled to find a new job, losing both money and status, leading to endless quarrels in their now impoverished household. Eventually, they divorced and now live separately. Brandon, desperate for a job, finally found work as a factory worker. He spends his days standing in front of a conveyor belt, endlessly assembling machines as part of a repetitive process. Meanwhile, Sarah became a topic of discussion among her local classmates for her actions toward me. Abandoned even by her family, she now lives alone, struggling to afford meals. Her once prized beauty faded away. She's barely making ends meet by working night jobs. As for Annie and me, we continue to live happily. Our focus on developing excellent employees led to stable and growing company performance. Just as the company helped me, I now aim to fulfill the hopes of the younger generation. We've enhanced our educational programs and training systems for our employees, which has already led to the creation of an innovative new product. But it's not just a new product that was born. Annie and I also welcomed a beautiful daughter. Annie's family is overjoyed and adores her. I'm so glad I met you. I'm truly happy, I said. Me too, Annie replied. When I graduated from middle school, I thought my life was over. But by never giving up on my potential and tirelessly searching for a path, I've been helped by many and now lead such a happy life. I want to continue delivering products that make the world a better place as a way to give back. With this resolve in my heart, I smiled at my precious family.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie. making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.